Viannos 1943. How the Wehrmacht paid for 500 deaths in Greece. It was a feast day. Church bells should have been ringing across the hills of Crete. Instead, the sound that tore through those mountain villages on the morning of September 14, 1943, was gunfire. Not the distant rumble of a battlefield. Close, personal. The kind that comes from a soldier pressing a barrel to a man's chest in his own front yard. Within 3 days, over 500 people were dead. Not soldiers, farmers, grandfathers, teenage boys who had never touched a weapon, and the German commanders who gave those orders. They believed they would never answer for it. They were wrong. You're watching timelines of war, where we don't just cover history, we chase it into the corners that textbooks skip. If that's what you're here for, hit subscribe and turn on notifications right now, because what you're about to hear is one of the most brutal chapters of World War II occupation, and one of the most satisfying reckonings that followed it. Let's get into it. To understand what happened in those Cretan hills, you have to understand how Europe collapsed fast. On September 1, 1939, Germany invaded Poland and the Second World War began. Within 6 weeks in the spring of 1940, Hitler's war machine rolled through Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, and France with terrifying speed. Britain stood alone. The rest of Western Europe was under Nazi boots. Hitler's next target was the Soviet Union. But before he could gamble everything on that eastern campaign, he needed his southern flank secured. He couldn't afford instability in the Balkans threatening his supply lines. So on April 6, 1941, Germany invaded Greece. The assault was overwhelming. The German 12th Army, backed by Italian and Bulgarian forces, punched through Greek and British Commonwealth defenses. Thessaloniki fell within days. By April 27, 1941, Athens was occupied. The swastika flew over the Acropolis. Mainland Greece was finished. The surviving Allied and Greek forces retreated to one last stronghold, the island of Crete. What followed was unlike anything the world had seen before. In May 1941, Germany launched Operation Mercury, the first large-scale airborne invasion in military history. 22,000 paratroopers dropped from the sky onto the island. Allied commanders actually had advance warning through cracked Enigma intelligence, and yet the sheer weight of German air power ground down the defenders day by day. Cretan civilians didn't wait for orders. Armed with hunting rifles, farm tools, and whatever they could find, ordinary men and women threw themselves into the fight. The resistance was fierce. German casualties during the assault were so severe that Hitler would never again authorize a major airborne operation for the rest of the war. But Crete fell. Under the occupation that followed, the island was divided into zones. Viannos, a cluster of mountain villages nestled between the towering mass of Mount Dicte and the Libyan Sea, initially fell under Italian jurisdiction. And here's where it gets complicated. The Italians and the armistice. Italian occupation was harsh, but it was not German. There is a meaningful difference. Italian officials, in many documented cases, secretly warned Cretan villages of coming German reprisals. Some Italian officers helped hide people condemned to death by the Germans, smuggling them to safer ground. Many refused outright to participate in Jewish deportations happening elsewhere under Nazi command. It wasn't heroism at scale. It was quiet, individual resistance within a criminal system, but it kept a fragile, uneasy lid on the worst impulses of occupation. Then on September 8, 1943, 2 months after the Allied landings in Sicily, Italy surrendered to the Allies. That lid came off. Bandouvas and the spark. In the mountains around Viannos and Ierapetra, resistance had been growing for months. The largest guerrilla force in the region was commanded by Manali's Bandouvas, a hard, seasoned Cretan partisan who knew these hills like he knew his own hands. Since May 1943, the Germans had maintained a small outpost in the village of Kato Simi. 3 soldiers stationed there collected food supplies for the Wehrmacht, specifically potatoes, and kept watch on a population already deeply suspected of supporting the resistance. On the night of September 9, 1943, Bandouvas made his move. His fighters attacked the outpost. 2 German soldiers were killed. Their bodies were disposed of in a mountain crevice. It was a calculated strike, one designed to demonstrate that German authority in these hills was not absolute. What happened next shows exactly how the Wehrmacht operated. A larger German unit moved into the valley to investigate. Rather than advancing exposed, they forced local civilians to walk ahead of them as human shields, men and women used as living armor to prevent ambush. It didn't work. Bandouvas' fighters were positioned on the slopes above. They opened fire. The terrified civilians broke free and ran. A full battle erupted across the hillsides near Kato Simi. By the end of the day, the German force was retreating. 12 German soldiers were captured alive. Bandouvas lost 1 man. 1. The Wehrmacht, the same military that had conquered most of Europe, had just been outfought and humiliated in a Cretan mountain valley by a band of partisans. In Heraklion, the German commander read the battle report, and he was furious. Müller's order. Generalleutnant Friedrich-Wilhelm Müller was the senior German military commander on Crete. He had built his reputation on one tool, collective punishment. If partisans operated in a region, the civilians who lived there paid the price. Not because they were proven guilty, because they were there. On September 13, 1943, one day before the Feast of the Holy Cross, announcements appeared in local newspapers across Heraklion. The language was cold and bureaucratic, the way orders for mass killing always are. Villages accused of supporting resistance groups would face severe measures. The actual order Müller issued was not bureaucratic at all. Every male over the age of 16 in the designated area was to be executed, without trial, without evidence, without appeal. In more remote settlements, soldiers were instructed to show no mercy to anyone. The principle was simple and monstrous: collective punishment. If you lived in the wrong valley, you died. Dawn on September 14, 1943 came with boots on cobblestones. 3 days of killing. Soldiers of the 22nd Infantry Division entered the villages of Viannos and western Ierapetra from multiple directions simultaneously, sealing roads and blocking escape before the communities even knew what was happening. They went door to door. Men were dragged from beds, pulled from fields, hauled out of courtyards. Some were barely 16. Some were well into their 70s. Women and children were held back, forced to watch as their fathers, husbands, and sons were pushed into village squares and lined up against walls, olive trees, and stone terraces. Then the machine guns opened fire. Those who survived the first bursts were finished with pistols. Bodies collapsed into ditches and across thrashing floors. Houses were stripped of everything valuable, then torched. Livestock were slaughtered or taken. Harvests were burned to ash. Wells were fouled. When the soldiers were done, they left behind communities with nothing, not food, not shelter, not even the living to grieve freely. In the village of Riza, a 20-year-old woman named Chrysanthi Kasokraki Alexamanalaki hid with her husband and 2 small children in a ravine. She survived. Her father did not. According to a witness who saw it happen, Chrysanthi's father faced his killers and asked them plainly, "Why are you doing this? I have done nothing wrong." They didn't answer with words. They struck his hand, then they used a bayonet. Decades later, Alexamanalaki spoke about her father's death. She said that a bullet, a clean death, she might have been able to accept. But what they did to him, that, she said, she could never digest. And even after killing him, they robbed the family of ritual. Her mother tried to bring the body inside to wash away the blood. Soldiers forced her out and burned the house down with him still inside. In another village, 7-year-old Giannis Singelakis watched from inside his home as soldiers dragged his father and uncle into the yard. He heard the gunshots that killed his father. He heard the sounds of his uncle being bayoneted. His mother grabbed him and escaped through a window as machine guns fired behind them. For the rest of his life, Singelakis said those bursts of gunfire were the sound of the day his world ended. Greek historian Vangelis Tsoutsompis later described the logic, if it can even be called that, behind the Nazi targeting. If a man could fight, he was a target. If a woman could feed a fighter, she was a target. If an elder could offer advice, he was a target. If a child might one day resist, he was a future enemy. Under that reasoning, no one in those villages was innocent. No one deserved to live. Between September 14 and 16, 1943, at least 17 Cretan villages were targeted. The confirmed death toll reached 461. Most historians believe the true number surpassed 500. More than 1,000 homes were reduced to burnt rubble. Entire communities were left with nothing to eat and nowhere to sleep as winter approached. The reckoning. The war ended in May 1945. Germany surrendered, and the men who gave the orders discovered that hiding behind military rank doesn't make murder disappear. Friedrich-Wilhelm Müller, the man who signed the death warrant for hundreds of Cretan civilians, was captured by the Soviet Red Army in East Prussia as Germany collapsed. He was extradited to Greece, brought to Athens, and put on trial alongside General Bruno Breuer, another senior German commander who had overseen atrocities during the Cretan occupation. Both men were convicted of war crimes. Both men were sentenced to death on December 9, 1946. On May 20, 1947, chosen deliberately as the 6th anniversary of the German airborne invasion of Crete, both men were executed by firing squad. The 22nd Infantry Division, the unit that carried out the massacre, pulled out of Crete in the autumn of 1944. It was redeployed to the Balkans, Yugoslavia, Serbia, Macedonia, Bosnia, continuing its anti-partisan operations almost until the final hours of the war. In March 1945, it was renamed the 22nd Volksgrenadier Division. It surrendered to Yugoslav forces in Slovenia in May 1945, shattered thousands of its men dead, wounded, or captured. The unit that had executed unarmed farmers in Crete ended the war in pieces. Today, every village in the Viannos region has a memorial to the dead. Stone monuments in quiet squares, in the shade of the same olive trees where men were lined up and shot. During the Second World War, Greece lost approximately 350,000 people to occupation, starvation, and systematic murder. More than 60,000 Greek Jews were deported and killed in Nazi concentration camps, one of the highest proportional losses of any Jewish community in Europe. The Viannos Massacre is not the most famous atrocity of the Second World War, but it is one of the most complete examples of what occupation looked like at its worst, and what accountability, when it finally came, looked like at its most deserved. 500 people killed over 3 days, 2 commanders executed, 1 division destroyed. History doesn't always balance the ledger, but sometimes, just sometimes, it does. That's the story of Viannos. If this hit different for you, if you think these stories deserve to be told, the best thing you can do right now is subscribe to Timelines of War and share this video. Every view tells the algorithm that this history matters. We'll see you in the next one.